Hi, everyone. I'm Molly, filling in for Darren Dunstan this week. Welcome to Tuesday Topics. We're just letting people come in right now. Should be good there. Is everybody able to hear? Fantastic. Okay. So our presenter today is Michael Bruneau, and so he'll be leading the leading us today. And then also, if you have questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to put those in the chat. And there'll be moments we'll be able to address questions throughout his presentation. So without further ado, Mike, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Molly. And once again, thank you for filling in for Darren today. So I really appreciate it. So about, I would say 6 to 8 weeks ago, I was meeting with Bob Pelisano after a training initiative, and we were going through some different things about how to. I've known Bob since I've been at Drexel, and really one of the things that was really nice was we started sort of talking about ways in which we protect our time and how we get things done. And that conversation sort of stemmed into this talk where he had encouraged me to take some of the things that I've learned through my journey of self-development and learning a lot about, work tactics and being optimally productive while also maintaining some level of balance. And he encouraged me to do a Tuesday topic on it. So I came up and I had recently finished a book by Dr. Cal Newport out of the University of Georgetown University. And the book's called Deep Work. So some of you may have read it. But what I really hope to do today is to facilitate a discussion to tell you a little bit about deep work, a little bit about the system that is deep work, and some of the tools that I think can help plug in to giving you another way of taking control of your work-life balance. So that means dealing with things like email and controlling meetings and so on and so forth. And some of these things you may already be doing, which is a good thing as well. So to give you a little bit of background about myself, okay, as soon as I can. So this is me, and this picture is of me in, I would say, June or July of 2016. I had just finished my PhD up at Springfield, Massachusetts, and I was getting ready to embark on my first professorship at Drexel University. So this is right in front of the 3 Parkway building. And at the time, I could really remember how excited I was. And I felt like, reaching the PhD was sort of the top of the mountain, and that all I had to do is take the knowledge, skills, and abilities that I had learned throughout my education and training, and really looking forward to a career where I was going to finally not have to focus so much on pleasing other people to get degrees and to get accolades and get recognition for some of the hard work that I had put in years prior. But shortly after I had begun working at Drexel, I noticed that things started to scale a little bit differently. So the teaching load increased up to 40 or more credit hours over a course of a 12-month calendar. The emails started to grow to a level where I wasn't able to respond to every single email, or I was getting upwards of 80 to 100 emails per day. And it started to become this sort of anxiety ridden experience where I was really always concerned about pleasing other people and making sure that I responded to every single email almost exclusively right after it came in. So I'd get an email, I'd leave my Outlook open all day, and I realized that I was just as anxious as I've always been with my workload, trying to provide really high quality teaching that provides the students with a valuable learning experience. And it was just not scaling to the point where I was able to do all of it, right? I wasn't able to provide the high quality teaching that I really wanted to. It was requiring a lot of nights, a lot of weekends, a lot of 1 and 2 a.m. nights before I'm actually going to sleep. And I couldn't keep up with the email load. And so at the same time, I was publishing some papers, I was writing grants. And so I knew that the amount of volunteers that we had were going to have to start to increase in order for me to meet that expectation for that research output. So I had to work with people who volunteered within the health sciences department. And then we began taking on students within the co-op program, okay, which is a really great resource for folks I cannot speak highly enough about my co-op students. Every single one of them has exceeded my expectations, and they're really, really a great resource, and they're very willing to work. So I realized that the expectations of me being able to provide them with good mentorship experience, realizing that they don't work for me, they're really supposed to work with me, and that there's an obligation and responsibility that I have to make sure that they're getting an optimal learning and work experience with themselves. And so at the same time, I was ramping up my efforts within the clinical exercise physiology lab. There was just a lot, and there was only one of me to really do all these different things. We were collaborating with people across the college and the Department of Nutrition Sciences, Physical Therapy, Rehab Sciences, Creative Arts Therapies are some that come to mind as I present this. And we were applying for grants. And so it was just sort of, I kind of felt like I was in work debt, where I was in work debt up to my eyeballs, and I couldn't really, in order to meet that same level of expectation, I was working 7 days per week, 80 to 100 hours easily throughout the 7 days. And so ultimately, I had to take a hard look, and I said to myself, okay, what are some things that some of the best people in the world are doing? You hear the adages that CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, CEOs of hospital based systems, that they typically somehow find the time to read, you know, a book a week, at least for the course of a year. And I'm like, well, if these are some of the busiest people in the world and they could read a book a week, I should be able to, somehow do those same types of behaviors if I want similar results. And when I really started looking at this, I realized that a major driver of the overwhelm was not teaching the 40 credits. It was not mentoring and conducting the research studies and moving the projects forward. It was really the constant email load that was really, for me, was a rate limiting step. And so the problem was that for every one email that you typically send out, you will typically get back one and a half, upwards of three emails in return. So most folks could probably very clearly realize that that is just not going to scale. If you respond to every single email, it's going to get to the point where it's far beyond anything that you're ever going to be able to respond to every single message to. And so I started thinking about this and said, well, what are some ways in which I can regain control and have a better balance with this email system? And one of the books that I had read in the process was a book by a gentleman named Tim Ferriss. I've talked about this before when I believe Roberta Perry, who works in our marketing and communications department, had she had interviewed me when I was a new faculty member at Drexel. And she had said, what are some books that you recommend to people? And I said, go with the 4-Hour Work Week. I think that's a really good book because in it, Tim Ferriss really focuses on this issue of email. And the idea was that he had made this quote that email is everybody else's agenda for how they think you should spend and use your time. So it's their agenda for your time, things they want you to move forward, things they want you to schedule, your meetings. And so what's really important is he comes up with this philosophy that I've since adopted, which is not feeling the pressure to respond to every single email as soon as it comes in. Instead, what I think has really been beneficial and helpful is he says you should really treat email like you do your laundry, right? You would never just wash a single pair of socks, right? Or a single dress shirt, right? Unless you've got a stain on it, right? And so the thinking is you would have to wait until the email load hit a critical mass. And then once you hit that point, you would clear it, right? So I quickly realized that, okay, I'm getting a ton of emails. Every email that I respond to is typically on average, this is what most of the production science says, is you're going to get 1.5 upwards of 3 emails in return. And that it's just never going to scale. You're never going to reach that inbox zero where you reach every single person all the time. And so I started adopting a practice where I only check my email typically twice per day now, right? And so usually sometimes it'll be pre-scheduled first thing in the morning, or maybe I'll work for a few hours uninterrupted before I even open and launch my inbox if I can do it. And then I'll take an hour, a fixed amount of time, 90 minutes maybe. And at the end of the 90 minutes, however many I was able to get through, that's it. At the end of the 90 minutes, you close the email client back down and you'll re-engage with it at the next time that you have scheduled to do that. So I would really encourage folks, to the extent that you can, to not leave your Outlook or your Mac, whatever platform you're using, open all of the time, because every single time that you get a new message, I think this is written in Cal Newport's book, it typically takes upwards of 15 minutes to switch your attention to the email that's coming in, read it, address it, and by the time you switch back to whatever you're working on, it takes about 15 minutes to get to that same level of depth that you were working at before. So things are going to take substantially longer to get done than they otherwise should. And you're going to just run out of hours in the day. You're just going to run out of hours, and you're going to have a solution of, well, where am I going to get this extra time in order to meet these expectations that I need to do for my job? So a good way of doing that, I think, is through email. So at this point in time of the talk, now that we're about, I would say, 15, a quarter of the way through, I really like to open the floor to members of the audience and hear about some of your experiences or challenges or questions you may have for me, specifically about the issue of email, before we move forward into the deep work.
Hi, Michael. This is Michelle Radigan from Creative Arts.
Hi, Michelle.
Thanks for saying what you have so far. One of the things that I've been trying to push back on is in a department when like one message goes out and then everyone just replies and they reply all. That's something that really, really gets to me. And then sometimes I feel like, but everyone else is replying. So if I don't reply, it looks like I'm not playing along. So I don't know if any of that was talked about in the book in terms of like, how do you navigate that with coworkers and teammates?
Well, let me ask you a question. Are you
Sure.
on a Mac or are you on a PC? And I'll tell you why it matters.
Okay, I'm on a PC and I do usually keep my email open while I'm working.
Okay.
So it's dinging in constantly. So first thing I'm going to do is turn that off.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I was thinking of, and there's got to be a way of doing it, if someone on our session here today is familiar with how to do this, is shut off the badge feature. There's a badges feature, which is that little red light that says you have a new message that came in. You can actually disable that, and so you're not notified every single time you get a new message. I think that would be a really good, because it's sort of getting rid of this Pavlov's bell, where every time it's like ding, 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 respond to my email, look at my email. I think shutting off badges would be a really good way of doing that, and realizing that you have to be comfortable with the fact that you're taking the time and you're responding to the email when it's appropriate for you to respond to the email, right? And this is another thing too that I realized in the process. I used to think the same thing. I feel like I'm not participating. I feel like I'm missing out, or people are going to think like I don't care what's being talked about in the thread. What's important is, I think, being transparent about what you're comfortable with is super important. And maybe just being honest with folks. Like, listen, sometimes I get like really like it's kind of like a pet peeve of mine to get all these reply alls. I know it's important to keep the line of communication open. But I think you'll respond better. One of the worst things that I think you can do is just to respond to something without fully reading through it. I've done that enough times where like I've made bad decisions and I say, wow, if I just dealt with that email at a time where I was really focused and I wasn't just responding just because it's the path of least resistance to get it off my plate, I would have made a better decision. Right. And so, one of the things that a good friend of mine once told me is only move as fast as perfection will allow. And right, if you can't think and provide your full undivided attention to something, you might make the wrong decision by replying to that email. And so you obviously don't want it to be weeks before you respond to that email, especially if it's something that's urgent. So when you are engaging with your email, I think one of the things that would be really helpful is to simply prioritize it. I have a group of students in statistics right now. We have over 200 students in the class, and I do try to respond to every single student. But if I notice there's a general theme, I'll write all the themes down and post something to Blackboard, and then I'll respond to them when I have time to do it. So they'll get the information that they need to address their question for an assignment, but their specific email may have to wait a few more days, right? And so that's one message I have to send out to 200 students that addresses most of the questions about the class, and instead of individually dealing with the same thing over and over and over again. So shut off badges. I would highly recommend that. And if you have a job where you can't respond, you can't shut your Outlook down at all. Some people are in that boat. My recommendation would be keep the badges off and try something like what's called a Pomodoro technique. Have folks heard of it? Right. So essentially there's I'll talk about it when I get to the tools that I use to do deep work and to organize this. It's a tool it's an app on smartphones called Tide, but you can look up online with the Pomodoro technique. Essentially what it is if you're having a hard time picking up speed and getting going, it says, okay, rather than focusing on a task, I need to fill out my mail-in voter ballot. Instead it will be, okay, you have 25 minutes. And for the next 25 minutes, I want you to open up the mail-in ballot and look at all the candidates. And I want you to go through each specific thing in research. And so rather than making a task to-do list, you're making a time focus thing where you're not disappointed if at the end of the 25 minutes, the task isn't done. You're celebrating the fact that I got a 25-minute work session done. And the goal is to accumulate as many of those throughout the workday as you can. Right. And so then of course you would have to build in enough time to make sure that you're starting enough early enough, right? If you have a deadline. So figuring, okay, it took me 8 to 10 25-minute sessions to get this task done. So the next time I'm asked a similar task, I've now got data on it to know approximately how much time it's going to take me to get that kind of task done. Right. And so you just set your expectations and it's a little bit more realistic, I think. Anybody else? All right.
I had Michael, sorry, this is Diane. I couldn't find my unmute one.
Sure.
I work in my department has this thing where they have to say thank you to the emails.
Yes.
So if somebody sends me an email, I've got the information I needed. I don't need to send another one, but then they come back and they go, did you get my email?
Oh, if they say thank you?
Yeah, because I didn't acknowledge that I got the email. So it was kind of like.
So they want to thank you in return?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, that's another problem because those are like unnecessary messages, right?
Yes.
So usually I try to be all encompassing and say, thank you very much for your time and attention, blah, blah, blah. Right. But I think if the issue is if you have that as a problem, then, I think one of the, again, I'm trying to say this as like politely as I can. I think that if you're comfortable and you have a common understanding with how you work through email, it's worth having a conversation with some of your colleagues. It's not that you're being rude. It's not that you're ungrateful for the email. Just, I think explaining your process of how you handle and manage your email, I think is really important because, sometimes it's not an issue where it's you not responding to their email. It's their expectation for how people receive their email. Right. And so it's really, I think, an issue of just being clear and transparent about the relationship that you have and the boundaries that you're willing to keep with your own email messages. So that way people at least have a common understanding that, hey, if I want to email Diane, it's best to email her at 10 a.m. or 2 p.m. because those are the times where I know that she's checking, or she's told me that, if that's the time where she typically checks email. So you can actually do this in Outlook is you can schedule emails. And I do a lot of this where let's say that I know that I want to contact, Soka's on the call, right? Soka and I are on a bunch of different committees together here in the college. And if I know that she likes to have protected time in the morning, that's really important for me to know. And so I will write the email at the time that's convenient for me, but I will schedule it at a time where I know that she's most likely to check it. So the email automation of the email will actually send the message at the time that you want to send it, which I love. I love that feature about using Outlook. So a lot of times when I write emails to students, sometimes I'm drafting them at 11, 12 o'clock at night. I know that's outside of work hours, but it's a time where I'm thinking clearly. I've probably come back from martial arts. I'm relaxed and I could think thoughtfully. So it's a time where I'm maximizing that workspace in order to do so. But I may respond to them at 11, but I'll schedule them all to be deployed by 9 o'clock the next morning so that you don't have a lot of back and forth at 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning type things going on. And so it provides, again, a tool, a resource to regain some level of control with that aspect of your workflow. Is that helpful, Diane?
Yes, but I usually don't indicate yes. So letting you know how I handle my verbals.
I got you. Okay. Thank you. So is there anybody else that has questions? I'd like to go forward and show you a couple other things that I think are time warps throughout our workday, and some ways that I think that I try to schedule things, and give you some other tips that I think can be helpful, specific within deep work, which is what it's all about. And that's the concept of meetings, right? So if you add up all the phone calls, if you add up all the meetings, you add up all the email, you could really work 6 to 7 hours of the day without actually moving any of the things that you're responsible for moving forward done. So one of the things that I think is really important is when you agree to a meeting, I try to schedule all of my meetings on the same day. Now, maybe they all don't have to be back to back, because there is an issue of Zoom fatigue, that, the CNHP newsletters have really done a good job illustrating. But to the extent possible, the meetings that you're capable of controlling, if you put the ones you must go to, and people say, hey, are you available on this day? Always try and schedule those things on the same day. So all your meetings are occurring on the same meeting day. And then your non-meeting days could be time where you can actually get work done. And that leads me to another slide that I have here. It's a couple slides ahead of time. But where is it? Where is it? It's right here. I have it. I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So just because you are available doesn't mean you have to be available. Okay. And I think that's really important. So a lot of times, if technically you have nothing scheduled on your calendar and you do have the 1 o'clock time open on that particular day, if that's the only meeting that you're going to agree to, you've now just completely changed the workflow of how your workday is perceived, because now you've got this meeting. So what I would recommend doing is taking this particular task and allocating it and saying, you know what, I'm available on Thursday between 9 and 11, or from 2 to 4. Which one's better for you? And most of the time, people will choose one of the two options, right? And so I think that having an understanding and trying to be strategic with how you organize the schedule really seems to work. This is one thing that I do, is try to have protected days where I know I can have hours of uninterrupted time to work on, say, a manuscript that I'm submitting for publication consideration, or putting an IRB project forward, so on and so forth. So I think that's a really important thing with regards to scheduling meetings and taking meetings, is trying to put them on days where you have other meetings that are non-negotiable that you must go to, and realizing that just because you may have an opening in your schedule doesn't mean you have to take a meeting at that time. If it's better for you to renegotiate and put it, some people like having multiple meetings on one day. I like having meetings all in one day, so that way I can be very effective. And I realize that my expectations have changed. I'm not going to expect that I'm going to get a lot done today because I'm taking these meetings to move things forward, right? But then I'm going to have other days where I'm not taking any meetings whatsoever. A lot of times I like to do this on Fridays. So that way I have time to ease into the weekend a little bit, right? And so just because you are available doesn't mean you have to be available. The other thing that I also try to do is I need to know what we're actually meeting about. So some people will set meetings and they won't actually have a clear-cut agenda of what they hope to accomplish. So a lot of times what's really good is to schedule another meeting right afterwards, or to ask for some kind of agenda, so it's very clear what the goal and expectation of the meeting is. And if you finish the meeting early and you have the free time where you want to chat a little bit with somebody, you're free to do so. But at the end of that meeting, you have another obligation and meeting you need to attend. So I think the challenge occurs is when you agree to a meeting and there is no clear agenda of what the next actionable step is to move a project or an initiative forward, and there's no clear cut end time. That's how you end up being in the room that should have been 30 minutes for 90 minutes, an hour and 20 minutes or longer, right? And so now you're like, oh, wow, I'm way behind now. It was great to catch up with so-and-so, but now all this work that I had planned to get done this afternoon is now, it's got to get reallocated to another day and time to make it happen. So it really just creates a challenge. Now, some people would say, I need to meet with you. We have this deadline. And I was sort of thinking about, should I put this in? Should I not put this in? But then I said, I'm going to put this into the deck because I think it's important, and it's the importance of preparation. And I think that when people need to meet with you, it's important to realize that we're all given the same amount of time. Okay. We're all given 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and we're expected to sleep. We're expected to work. We're expected to have family time. And so I think that's really important, is that when someone's giving you an ask, is having an appreciation for when it's okay to say no if you feel that the quality of the work that you need to do does not provide you enough time with what the ask is being asked for. Now, of course, some of those things, it's beyond your control. A boss is directly telling you, you must do this, and you don't have the ability. You have to deliver for that person. But that extra time that you may need to pick up in order to get that work done, that needs to be balanced back. So you need to take a longer lunch period, right, to make up for that time. Okay. Um, so this is something that I say to a lot of people, is that sometimes if people are asking me something that's unrealistic, like putting together an abstract for a conference, and the conference is Friday at 5 o'clock, and someone says, hey, here's this data, let's put together an abstract and write this abstract up at Friday at 9 o'clock in the morning. It's unrealistic for someone to expect you to drop everything you're doing and dedicate your whole workday to get somebody else out of a bind. So I would say, you know what? I really appreciate the opportunity that you want to consider me for this abstract opportunity. I'd love to be part of it, but it's just not enough time, and I have other obligations that's going to prevent me from doing the quality of work that I really expect and hold myself accountable to. And so, unfortunately, I'm going to have to pass on this opportunity at this time. But I'm hopeful that with a little bit more time and preparation, we'll be able to work on some of these things for the next one. And so now you've just taken a negative situation and turned it into a positive. And if the person gets upset with you, remember, it's their personal problem, because they did not give you the time necessary to do the work, not the other way around, that you just wouldn't budge to help them through the problem. Here's another thing too. Do not work more hours to fix your overwhelm. I think that's really important. You need to prioritize what it is that you're doing. And Tim Ferriss talks about this a lot in his book as well, which is that he does an example of a stockbroker who makes $240,000 a year, or a person who makes like coconut heads in Hawaii for 20 hours a day, right? One person makes $270,000 and has to work 80 hours to get it. The other person works 10 hours and makes 40,000 a year. And who's really richer, right? The person who's living on Hawaii, who's on the beach every day, enjoying their time, or the person that has to work in, let's say, like a big major city like New York, and has to work constantly under stress to get that high absolute number, but on a relative basis, the hourly would actually be more money for the person making coconut heads on the beach. So remember that we all have a finite amount of time. There's undoubtedly situations where you need to work more than 40 hours in order to get the work done. But again, if you don't balance that time off with additional time in the weeks following, you're really doing one of two things. You're either working for free, or you're working less than what your hourly rate is from your salary. So just keep that in mind. Okay. So I think it's important to have boundaries, right? And boundaries, I always think about as assumptions. And assumptions from a statistical perspective would be conditions that need to be met in order for something to show what it intends to show, in order for something to be valid. And so you have to just be really transparent and tell people what it is what are the circumstances that you feel comfortable working within, right? And there needs to be rules to those boundaries. And if in fact somebody infringes on those rules, there's consequences for that, right? So if you don't enforce the boundary that you've now set, your boundary basically means nothing, right? It shows that the person doesn't have to have any respect for you. They don't have any respect for your boundaries. And in this book by Dr. Henry St. Cloud and Dr. John Townsend, they go through boundaries from financial components. They go through it from people who have children and the child is, not abiding by their curfew, things like that. And so rules and conditions that you feel comfortable with within your work life, that this is a boundary that, I agreed to do upwards of this amount of work on this project. You didn't do your part on this project. So now, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to bail you out to do this for this particular project, right? I've done my part fully, completely, to the best of my ability. And so we really need to make sure that we understand that these clear boundaries and where the line is drawn needs to be set. Because if you don't have boundaries, people will continue to take advantage of you. So having said that, another brain break, another time stop. Are there any questions, Molly, from the chat, or any questions that members of the audience have for me about scheduling, prioritizing, or setting boundaries?
I don't have anything in the chat as of right now. People are obviously welcome to ask questions.
Okay. Anything from anybody so far?
Hi, Dr. Bruno. I have a quick question.
Hi, Soka.
Hi. So, for the days that, well, for my job, I have to take meetings every day.
Mhm.
So, would you recommend taking the chunks where I am trying to do deep work in the morning or afternoon based on when my level of productivity is the highest?
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So
Tips around that.
yeah, so exactly. So I'm happy to go through that. That's exactly what the next slide is what deep work is, and the 3 different ways people could typically implement deep work, which is the hours of uninterrupted time to get the things they need to get done without meetings and emails and phone calls interfering. And so if it's okay, I'll go forward and explain that, and I think I'll be able to address your question in the meantime. Does that sound good? Yeah. Okay. So the solution to all this, of course, with respect to the work, is if you're willing to set boundaries, if you're willing to say, I'm only going to be taking work hours between 8 a.m. and 6 or 6:30 p.m., and I'm going to take a full hour break somewhere throughout the day for lunch, then this actually is a solution. I read this book right around the holidays last year when we were clearly living in a very different time. And I rented this actually from my library. I didn't even buy the book. I rented it from the library, and I heard a lot of cool things. I saw some things on podcasts. People were talking about deep work. I'm like, what exactly is this deep work thing? So again, this is Cal Newport, and he is a professor at Georgetown University. He's a computer science PhD who does not have any social media accounts. So think about that. Computer science person, someone that is an expert at writing code and does not have any social media accounts. Okay. And he goes through, and there's all kinds of TED Talks that he has available online of why he doesn't use social media. But really, as you can see here, right, it's the deep work is all about the ability to focus, okay, without distractions on a cognitively demanding task, work that you need to move forward. It's a skill that you need to work on, and it's going to allow you to quickly master complicated information and produce better work in less time. So it's going to make you more efficient. Okay. It will also make you better at what you do and provide the sense of true fulfillment that comes from craftsmanship. So you're focusing on the process of putting in certain amount of work, and you're feeling more accomplished because you're taking the time to actually get the work done. So you have a sense of accomplishment, not sort of this limbo state where you're not actually taking things forward. You're working day to day, but you're so behind in all these other tasks, you can't actually get them done. So this is actually the description of the book, right? So he talks about superpower and how we need to function in the 21st century. But the way to really do deep work is you need hours of uninterrupted time where you could just be left alone and do your work. Okay, that's really as simplistic and as clear as I can say it, right? You can't be bothered. You got to get it done. And I've created these categories. These 3 are not from the book, but I have generally created these categories in 3 different ways that I've adopted from what I've read in that book. So some people can do what I call morning or evening rituals. Okay. So meaning they wake up at 5 or they wake up at 6, and the first 2 hours of their day are non-negotiable. That's me time to get my deep work done. Right. And so no matter what happens the rest of the day, at least I got my work done on the front end of the day. Or the last 2 or 3 hours at night when I'm cognitively strong, I'm going to work and I'm going to leave work at a certain time. And that 2 to 3 hours at the end of the day, I'm going to do every day, Monday through Friday, consistently. And that's going to be my time to get my work done. I'm going to front load it to the before my workday starts, or I'm going to do it after the workday ends. Of the 2, I think for me, I'd rather have it on the front end before I start, because you don't know what's in that email inbox when you open up. You don't know what kind of stuff's going to get thrown at you at the last minute. So this is a morning ritual, is basically taking at least a 2-hour block. I think Cal says it should be at least 90 minutes, and blocking it as the first 90 minutes to an hour and 20 minutes of your day every single day before you start work. So that way, no matter what happens the rest of the day, you're getting it done. The other one is called essentially the daily grinder. Okay. Which basically means you're integrating it into your workday. Okay. You're into your workday. And you're taking 2 or 3 hour blocks in your schedule that's surrounded by your meeting. So let's say you have a meeting at 9 and then your next meeting is at noon. Well, that means at 9:30 or 10 o'clock, you're shutting the email down, you're putting the phone on do not disturb mode, and you're sitting down for that 2 hours and you're just going to focus on work during that block. And at the end of the 2 hours, if you don't finish, you make a note of where you left off. And that as the next deep work session, that's where you pick up and continue onward. Okay. So the goal is having enough deep work sessions throughout the week. So that way you are getting this continual sense of accomplishment and you're moving things forward. Okay. The last one is a weekend warrior. And Cal Newport talks about this in the book. A weekend warrior is somebody who, will try and like truncate their 40-hour work week into four 10s, right? And so, or 3 12s. So someone will try and say, okay, I'm going to do most of the work that I have to do on like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of this week. And I'm just going to do 12-hour days. And then I have all day Friday, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, and all day Monday where I can have days of uninterrupted time. Okay. I've heard stories where some people have actually gone on weekend retreats, where, for instance, someone from when I was living in Massachusetts, somebody would live in Boston, jump on an Amtrak, go all the way down to Washington, D.C., 4 or 5 hours, get off the Amtrak in D.C., and would eat lunch in DC, jump on the Amtrak and drive back. And so you have like 10 hours on that particular day where the person would get that work done. I've heard other stories where people will, go to a hotel for a long weekend and just, sit down with their work, things like dissertation work or thesis work or grant work that people really want to be able to move forward. So we're talking about either 3 ways. You can either front load it into the first 2 or 3 hours of your day. You could strategically block non-negotiable times in your schedule every day, a 2-hour block. I like to try and save at least 4 hours a day where I can work and surround my meetings around that. And the third would be, I've done this about 1.5 years ago, is the weekend warrior. When I was working on grants, I would get my major teaching done on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, I would be able to write like a whole draft of a grant in 4 days. Now, I know you're working outside of work hours, but for me, I'm okay with that because I know it's going to provide me with an opportunity to move what is important to me, getting that grant submitted. And I felt comfortable. It was a choice that I was willing to make, not a choice I had to make. So that's very important too. So those are 3 different ways, I think, Soka, to answer your question, that we could really integrate deep work. The other thing then, of course, is, well, how do I actually schedule this into my day, right? And so what does this actually look like? So there's this concept called calendaring. I don't know if people have heard of it, but the general idea is you schedule every single minute of your day from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed. And obviously you wouldn't just put like, I think it's kind of, some people could do it, but I think it's a little ridiculous to put like sleep 11 o'clock at night till, 7 in the morning or 10 at night to 6. Some people need that level of control. And if you need that, please, by all means, do it. But the idea behind calendaring is you put the appointments and the things you need in the calendar and you build the deep work in around it. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And I would encourage you to do it as well in just a minute. So the other thing we already talked about, just because you are available, I kind of clustered this with the calendar area where I'm going to show you how to do that. So if it's okay, can I stop sharing my screen for just a second, Molly? Okay. So what I got here, folks, is I'm going to share it now and show you, give me 1 second here. And I'm going to share a blank calendar for this week to show you exactly how to do this. And I think that's one of the things when I had met with Stephen and Darren originally about this, I said, I really want to be able to deliver a talk that people are going to be able to end and say, I can really use and do some of that stuff. So here's a hypothetical calendar for this week, right? Today's Tuesday and it's completely blank. How exactly would you build your deep workout? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on building this around the traditional 9 to 5 schedule. Okay. Like a traditional 9 to 5 schedule. So if you have your calendar in front of you, you like to do your own version of this right now, I would highly encourage you to follow along and try it. Right. And then, you can make it changes as you need fit. Okay. So the first thing I would say is let's say you go to bed at 11 o'clock at night, right? Well, 8 hours later is 7 in the morning, right? So you should be getting up around 7 in the morning if you're getting your full 8 hours of sleep. Some people, they might start their day earlier. Some people might start their day later, but for all intents and purposes, let's go ahead and just assume that the person is going to wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning. So what I actually try to do is you can put your Drexel specific calendar. I color coordinate it, blue for Drexel Dragons, green for personal stuff. So I'll just do this iCloud where work is going to be Drexel and home will be blue in this particular case, because the iCloud gives me that option. So I know that here's some protected time, right? So what I typically like to do is some people will put coffee or reading or the specific thing that they want to do. I think that's too fancy. I think what you just want to call it is my time. And whatever you choose to do in that 2 hours before you start your day is that this would be non-negotiable if you're going to bed consistently at 11 p.m. and you're waking up at 7. The first 2 hours of your day, you can read the newspaper, cook and make yourself a nourishing breakfast, spend time with your kids if you have children, spend time with your significant other. And this is protected time that is outside of the traditional 9 to 5. Okay. Now, the other thing that I think that you also have to build is for instance, tonight I'll be going to martial arts, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I know that for me, my Jiu-Jitsu class is going to start at 7 p.m. Right. So I will put that in as I will put this in as a appointment and say I go Monday, Tuesday, maybe I take Wednesday off, I go Thursday, Friday, right? So I know that in order to go to balance, especially with all the social distancing, the social restrictions and so on and so forth, you need more time, right? You have to give yourself travel time. So you have to build that in. So I might start this at like 6:30 every day. Okay. And then you've got your schedule built out. And then, the class goes from 6:30, 7 to 8. And so after 8 o'clock, guess what? We build in more my time. This is where you're going home and you're checking in with the people that you love and making sure that their day went okay. And so you're giving yourself that last 3 hours of the day to be truly present in the moment at home. Okay. And maybe you take a day off here and you have a little bit of time. Maybe you give yourself a little bit more of that time. So now you're just left with this work day, right? So I know, for instance, in my lab, I typically have a meeting with a student in a class, and we meet for an hour every Monday. So that's, I'll put the class in here. We meet for an hour. I meet with another student who's doing an independent study with me at 11. And then I know that I have my co-op meeting with my team for the clinical exercise physiology lab at 12 to 1, right? And then on certain Mondays, we have implementation science, right, Soka? So some meetings it's there, some meeting it's not. So once I do 3 hours, it's time for a break, right? So, traditionally what I'll go ahead and do, these actually should be color coordinated. I should be able to change the colors because these are work related items. So just change that so that way we're not getting confused here. The blue are work related items. That's how I do it. And so now I need a break, right? So this one right here would be called, okay. So now this is going to be a break. And I don't need a long break, but maybe you want to make yourself lunch. I'm calling it a hard break. This is non-negotiable. This is a requirement. Okay. A 30-minute requirement, right? So maybe I'm making myself another cup of coffee. And then somewhere around 1:30, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put in our task or our to-do list, right? Well, let me explain something to you. You do not want to put in specific tasks in your calendar. And I'll tell you why. If you allocate an hour to do a particular task and it takes you an hour and a half or 2 hours, it's throwing the rest of your day off. So rather, I think it's better to just put in deep work. And I usually like a 2-hour session. So I might go 1 to 3:30. And I don't care who contacts me. I don't care if it's my own family member that needs to contact me at that particular time about something that's not an emergency situation. Like my brother's asking me sometimes about, how we should pay off a student loan and so forth. Like we'll talk later about that. I have time dedicated to that later on in the day. So this will be a 2-hour deep work session, and whatever is on my task list, things that I need to get done, I just attack them in order of priority from what's most recent to be due to what's most late to be due. So I don't traditionally schedule any other meetings on Mondays after this. I'll try and keep the afternoon open. So I'm doing it again. So I got to change this to blue for the right color. But then I'll put in another break, right? Just to show you how to do this. And then I'll take another break there. And then I'll probably do another one of these deep work sessions, and I'll continue right here. And then maybe I take a break here and have something small to eat for a snack before you have martial arts, for example, right? So now I've got my 4 hours of work in this particular case. All right. Then on Tuesdays, it's not that I won't take meetings. Sometimes we have all college meetings. Sometimes we have meetings with research teams where we've already committed to department meetings. But generally, I try to keep Tuesdays off, okay, because I need that time to prepare for teaching my classes. And just one more thing, I might put something in here like email to start my day, right? So if I go ahead and do that, then I'm only giving myself 1 hour. I will still respond to them within 24 hours if I do not respond to the email at other times. And of course, if I'm ahead of schedule, I can go back and check in an email at other times. So when you look at Wednesday, for instance, if I just close out some of these, the key is I try to integrate it into every single day where I know, for instance, on Wednesdays, I teach class, right? So I teach an exercise physiology class, not happy hour, 3:25 from 12 to 2, right? And then I teach the statistics class online from 2 to 4, right? And so if I have an opening, I might ask somebody, hey, at 4 o'clock, I'm available. Do you want to meet me at 4 o'clock? Because I have that opening, right? But if someone says, are you available on Monday at 2 o'clock? The answer to that question is no. You need to take this as seriously as any other meeting. I am not available on Monday at 2 o'clock. I'm sorry. I'm just not available. It's nobody else's business how you're spending your time throughout the day. That's what you need to do to get your work done. And I think people would rather have you get the work done with quality than to not get the work done to just meet them at a time that they want just because they want to meet you then. So this is a very important thing that I try to do. So what am I doing to prepare for these classes? First 3 hours of the day, if I can do it, another deep work session. Okay. This is where I'm preparing. So that way these classes can go smoothly, right? So this is where I'm preparing a nice 2-hour block. If I can do it, I'm putting a finite amount of time on my email to get to the most important tasks for my particular day. And I'm building this into my schedule. So I have hours of uninterrupted time. So that way, when these classes go live, I'm prepared. I have answers for the questions that students have, and I'm ready to go. So this class can go as smoothly as it can. And then at the end of the day, if I don't have other things scheduled afterwards, once again, this is where I'm moving the next thing that I have to work on. And some people say you don't have a break here, but I would integrate some breaks by shifting this down, putting a break in here. Okay. So here's another break. I'll try and just give you an idea of what this looks like. But you just continue to organize your schedule in this way where you have to treat this time as protected time. So are you available at 5 o'clock on Wednesday? The answer to that question is no. Okay. So the answer to that question is no. The person's not going to know. You just answer no. And it's not a problem of you saying no to somebody and lying to them. It's true. It's not a lie if you're really using this time to work. If you're using this time to just not work and you're just using it for reasons to call a friend and have more my time, then you could feel guilty because you didn't use it for a real reason. Okay. But if you're using it for the purpose of working, you should not feel guilty because you're not really lying. You are busy. That time is your time. So I try and schedule the entire week this way. Okay. Where I'm stacking my meetings on the days where I have meetings. I'm integrating breaks throughout, and I have a very finite hard start time and end time. Okay. And I would highly encourage you that you could do it this way. You could do it the way where you want the first 3 hours of your day. If you're the morning ritual person, putting in your deep work schedule, first 2 hours, 9 to 11. I'm not opening my email till 11 o'clock. I have no meetings before 11. So this week, I'm scheduling all my meetings after 11 o'clock. right? And so the first 2 hours of your day, you're getting stuff done. You feel a sense of accomplishment, and you can go into those meetings more focused because you're getting the things done that you need to get done. And you're not worried about being behind, and your mind is half thinking about, I didn't get stuff done. And you're only half listening to what the person is talking about in that current meeting. So any questions about actually how to do this stuff? Some people would tell me, I've gotten feedback, but again, Dr. Pelisano asked me, he's like, hey, I need you to be able to talk with some people, because I think this would be a good thing that people would value in being able to see how to do some of this stuff. So this is the calendar side of deep work and making it work for you. Okay. And so is there any other feedback that people have? I know we have about 7 minutes left. Are there any questions in the chat, Molly, or things that people want to share or ask questions about?
Again, I don't have anything in the chat as of right now, but obviously people are welcome to ask.
Yagoda, you have any questions for me? I know you're in my class.
I don't have any questions at the moment.
Okay. I'm glad you came to this. Thanks for doing that. How about you, Liz? Do you have any questions about how you can integrate this into your day? Anything I can help you with?
Nothing right now. Very helpful information, though, expanding
Oh, yeah.
from what we talked about the other day.
I know we've had offline
Yeah.
conversations about this in the past, and so I'm glad. Thanks for coming too.
Yeah, thanks for doing this.
The last couple things I'll just do then, before we open up to any general questions people have, is, this is another book that I read by Ray Dalio, and he's a big investment broker for. He wrote a book called Principles. Okay. And the idea behind his book is really that it's all about radical transparency and just being super honest and transparent about everything, and not hiding anything. So I think that I try to live my life where if someone asks me for an ask, I could just be radically transparent. I can't do it for you this week. I'd be happy to help you, but I just can't do it this week. And my finding has been, some people, yeah, you might be afraid you'll lose opportunities. People won't want to work with you on a particular project or task. But most of the time, people are willing, if they really value the work that you're providing, usually they'll give you the additional time, because they value the kind of work, and they know that when you provide the work and this time to actually get the project done, that you're going to do it with quality, and it's really going to be something special. So how do you handle inputs? The last couple things that I have here is this comes from David Allen's book called Getting Things Done. The university has actually had a number of training seminars in terms of how to handle a new input that's coming into your workflow. So imagine, for instance, that there's an email and someone is asking you for your annual faculty evaluation, right? That's something that a lot of faculty members, staff members have to do this time of year. So you've got an email request coming in that says, I need you to do an annual faculty evaluation. So you have to ask yourself, is this something that I can take action on right this second? If the answer to this question is no, then it goes into this incubation stage where if you don't need it and it's just something that you need to hang on to for a reference, it goes into a reference file. If you don't need it at all, you just delete it. And if it's something that you might have to take action on in the future, you put it into a possible later action file. If it's something that you can take action on, which in this case you do need to take action on it, you need to ask yourself, what's the next action that I need to take? If you can do it in less than 2 minutes, just do it now and get it off your plate, or delegate it if it's not appropriate for you to handle, or to defer it to a later time if you need more time to schedule it in one of your deep work sessions. So you can put it into your deep work calendar system later on. If it's a project, it's going to take time. It's something new that you need to develop where it's going to require folder structures, put it into a project folder and make sure that that fits into your workflow, where you would do that work during some of your deep work sessions. So this sort of gives you an indication of how to manage this stuff instead of just letting the email build up and all the stuff they have to get done. It puts it into a reference folder, delete it folder, or I need to take action on this folder. So with that being said, the last thing that I got is really file naming, which is a lot of people have struggled to how to name their files appropriately. And during the quarantine, this is something I really took time to address because my files had all kinds of names that were just weird. They didn't have dates in them. And the idea is these are some general rules, and I'm happy to share these slides, folks, too, if they want them, is how to actually organize your files. And so typically when it comes to naming the files, give them some kind of descriptive logic so you know what the file is about, but you only need 2 or 3 criteria to really give it the specificity that you need to actually address it. The other thing too is, instead of having hundreds and hundreds of file names, have a root file with maybe 4 or 5 names. And within those files, maybe you have in Drexel, like my Drexel file has an administrative folder, a research folder, a courses folder, and a references folder. So I usually operate out of 4 possible folders. And once a new input comes in, it will, if it's something for class, it will go to, under courses, for instance, I'll have all the names of all the classes that I teach. And then within the classes, I'll have all of the PowerPoint slides, all of the syllabi that I've used. If I'm creating videos now that we're online, where the videos can be stored. And so I have this root folder, and that's driving me. And so it only takes me about 30 seconds to find the file that I need to find. But to end, I know I got 2 minutes left. This is a series of tools that I typically use in order to manage my workflow and create this sort of, I guess you could say, Mike Bruneau ecosystem that I've created for how I calendar to budget my day, how I use deep work to stay focused and concentrated, how I manage my tasks. So I think it's really important that when you're in a deep work session, if you're having a hard time staying focused or getting going, this is that app I was referring to earlier. It's called Tide, Tide. And what it will basically do is it will play either like meditation type music or muse kind of music, and it will follow the Pomodoro technique. So it'll play that kind of music in the background for 25 minutes, and then it'll sound off a bell at the 25-minute mark and give you a 5-minute break. And then most of the time, if I'm having a hard time getting work done, I'll just restart it and I'll just go 50, 75, 100. Sometimes I'm like 120 minutes into my deep work session. And I'm so impressed by how much work I was able to get done, because I took it from a task. Did you or did you not get it done, to I got this number of sessions of work done. Okay. And one of the things that I would say of why I've done that is because I realized good work takes time. Okay. Other tools that I use, obviously, I listen to Spotify. I always try and do 2 things at once. So I'm a martial artist. I try to listen to audiobooks when I'm going for walks, and I keep all of my notes and my tasks in some type of Apple Note, or you can use Evernote. You can use OneNote if you're on the Microsoft platform. And I schedule the things that I'm prioritizing that need to get done during the deep work session in my reminders app on my phone, so that when I've scheduled the deep work session at, let's say, 1:30 in the afternoon, whatever I'm supposed to be working on in that moment, I get a notification and a ding from my phone that tells me to work on it at that time. So it's priming me on what I need to be working at the appropriate time that I've designated to get that work done. So the last thing I'll say is, you see there's Outlook here and Mac Mail. My personal email only goes through Mac Mail. My work email only goes through Outlook. And again, I put those separately, so that way, if I'm checking email on the weekend, I'm not obligated to respond to the Outlook messages in my work email. And I'm not, and during work, if I happen to have this Apple open, I'm not obligated to respond to my personal email. So it keeps things separate. It keeps things focused. And it's how I have been able to regain control as a faculty member here at Drexel. So with that being said, thanks so much for everybody's time and attention. And if there's any other questions in the chat, or any other things you want to talk about, I'm happy to take them.
I think there were a couple notes in the chat, mostly about. See, Melinda commented on. Question would be, any advice on you about putting a hard stop to the end of the workday? She gets caught up on one more task mentality, and doesn't want to lose the momentum, but inevitably ends up working, so many more hours because of it.
Yeah. So again, my thinking would be is if you're in sort of the psychological flow state, I would say, and you have the time to work, you should embrace that. But then at the same time, realizing whatever that additional time is, give yourself the permission to take a couple hours off during the next work day if you want to go out and go grocery shopping now that we're all home, right? You're getting your work done, but maybe you have that little break. You took that extra time to get that task done, and that's good because you're in your psychological flow state. But at the same time, I think I do understand what you mean in terms of like a hard stop. I have a hard stop because I have a very expensive hobby. Martial arts is typically over $200 a month. And so if I don't go, I'm wasting my own money. So I have financial incentives to get my work done. There's all kinds of different tools and apps where, I'm trying to think of the exact one. It might be coach.me, where you can, if you're having a hard time, having a hard stop and having that boundary, you can put things like tasks where you must stop and you must get a certain amount of work done in a certain amount of time. And you put up like $100 for, into your account. And if you don't get it done by the deadline, then it like invests the money and sends it to a charity of your choice. So that sort of is kind of, for me, I have that sort of hard stop because I know that I pay good money to train martial arts. And if I don't go, then I'm losing money. So for me, I enjoy it. It's something that I've spent a lot of time and energy crafting, learning, making myself humble to do. And it's the one task that when 6 o'clock comes, it's non-negotiable. It's time to start getting ready to go, for example. But I know what you mean. I know exactly what you're talking about. Is sometimes you're in a state, you just want to keep working. And if you don't have anywhere else to be, it's okay to do that. But give yourself permission when you're not in that flow state and you want, you've put in the time. So I think it all balances out.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to thank Mike for help coming out and sharing with us today. It was really helpful. Obviously, this meeting is being recorded. I posted a link in the chat. So once this is uploaded to the cloud, it'll be available for you guys if anybody wants to share it or look at it again in the future. I also want to invite everybody. The other link is to next week's Tuesday topic. We'll have multiple presenters who were awardees of Drexel's Rapid Response for next week on the 27th at 4. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one. Be safe. Okay. We'll talk to you soon.